Before we dive into a forbidden love that shook an empire, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Join us for history brought to life, full of secrets, passion and revolution unfolding right before your eyes. The palace walls were not made of stone alone. They pulsed with secrets, as if every corridor had ears, every tapestry drank in whispers, and every candle flicker threatened to betray a hidden truth. It was the spring of 1789, a year that would soon shake the world. France stood on the edge of collapse. Famine gnawed at the countryside. The people howled for bread, and revolution simmered in the streets of Paris. Yet behind the gilded gates of Versailles, another storm was brewing, one not of politics but of the heart. She was Élise Moreau, daughter of a disgraced nobleman stripped of wealth, but clinging to her family's name. At 20, she moved through the palace as a lady-in-waiting, silent and watchful, her beauty the kind that could wound, her eyes deep, dark, and restless, carried a hunger not for jewels or titles, but for freedom. He was Adrien Lefebvre, a rising officer in the royal guard. His loyalty was supposed to belong to the crown, his future bound to service. Yet Adrien was not blind. He had seen the starving children outside Versailles, their hands reaching through iron gates for scraps of bread. He had heard the chants of rebellion in the distance, and though duty chained him to the monarchy, his heart was about to betray it. Their first encounter was not meant to be remembered. A glance in the hall of mirrors, her reflection colliding with his in a flood of candlelight. A momentary pause, his bow, her faint smile, yet the air between them burned. From that instant every stolen look became a spark, and sparks, when hidden in darkness, always threatened to ignite. But love within Versailles was more dangerous than open rebellion outside its walls. The Queen's court thrived on gossip, daggers hidden behind fans, and jealousy sharpened with every rumor. A lady-in-waiting caught in scandal could lose everything. A guard entangled with her could lose more than honor. He could lose his head. Still they could not resist. Behind the curtains of velvet halls, in gardens where roses bled under the moonlight, they began to meet. A touch of hands as music swelled, a hurried breath stolen between dances, a letter folded inside a glove. And in every moment danger grew closer, for someone was watching. A shadow lingered too long outside the Queen's chambers. A servant carried gossip heavier than silver trays. Somewhere in the palace, a whisper had already begun its poisonous journey. Élise believed their love was secret. Adrien believed it was safe. But already the echo of footsteps was following them, and one false move could turn a forbidden romance into a scandal that would shatter not just their lives, but the kingdom itself. Moonlight spilled like liquid silver across the marble floors of Versailles. The palace slept, but in one chamber a candle still burned. Élise Moreau sat hunched over a sheet of parchment, her hand trembling as ink bled into words that should never have been spoken aloud. Adrien, my heart has no reason, only fire. Every glance we share steals my breath. Every silence between us feels louder than 1,000 drums. If the world knew, it would condemn us. But if I must burn for this love, then let me burn. Her quill paused. She dared not sign it, yet the letter carried her soul. Folding it tightly, she pressed it to her lips before slipping it into the pocket of her gown. Tomorrow she would find a way to pass it into Adrien's hand. The next evening, during a masquerade, opportunity arrived. The palace glittered with masks of gold and velvet, laughter ringing hollow above, the rumbling stomachs of a starving nation beyond the gates. Musicians played, courtiers schemed, and in the chaos, Élise brushed against Adrien as if by accident. The letter slid into his glove, quick, invisible, dangerous. Their eyes met. Behind Adrien's mask, his gaze blazed with the same unspoken hunger. He gave the faintest nod, tucking the letter away. No one had seen, or so they thought. From the shadows of the ballroom, a pair of watchful eyes followed every movement. Comtesse Renard, mistress of rumors, queen of intrigue, thrived on secrets. She saw Élise's trembling fingers, Adrien's too careful posture, the subtle exchange hidden beneath silks and music. She smiled. Scandal was the sharpest weapon at Versailles, and she had just found a blade worth wielding. Later, in the silence of his barracks, Adrien read Élise's words by the dim light of a lantern. His pulse hammered. He had faced battlefields before, but no musket, no saber, No charge of cavalry had ever struck fear into him like this fragile letter. To love her meant treason against the court, against his oath, perhaps against the crown itself. Yet as he pressed the parchment to his chest, he knew he could not stop. Not now. Not when her words lit something inside. Him that no king could command, and no prison could extinguish. But while Adrien hid the letter under his uniform, the Comtesse whispered her discovery into waiting ears. Gossip like wildfire spreads faster than truth, and in Versailles, once a rumor took root, it was only a matter of time before it reached the throne. The next morning, Élise stepped into the Queen's chambers for her duties. Her heart pounded as always, for Adrien was near. But when the Queen's sharp eyes lifted from her embroidery and lingered too long on Élise's face, cold dread clawed her chest. Someone knew. The Queen's chambers were suffocating. Heavy drapes shut out the daylight, trapping Élise Moreau beneath the gaze of gilded mirrors and sharper eyes. Marie Antoinette, adorned in silks and pearls, sat in her chair like a figure carved from porcelain. Her fingers worked slowly at a piece of embroidery, though her eyes never left Élise. "Tell me," the Queen said softly, too softly, "do you find life at Versailles agreeable?" The question was harmless in sound, yet in the tone lurked something poisonous. Élise bowed, her throat tightening. "Your Majesty's court is the very jewel of France." The Queen's lips curved, though it was not quite a smile. "I hear whispers, Mademoiselle Moreau, dangerous whispers. They say a certain lady-in-waiting has been keeping secrets. Do you think secrets can survive in Versailles?" Every word was a test. Élise's pulse raced, her face a mask of composure while terror boiled beneath. One wrong syllable could unravel everything. She forced a steady voice. "Whispers, Majesty, are often born from envy." Marie Antoinette leaned back, studying her as one might study a painting, looking for flaws in the brushstrokes. Finally, she said nothing more. With a flick of her hand, Élise was dismissed. When the chamber doors shut behind her, Élise nearly collapsed. Every step down the corridor felt like treading on glass. Someone had spoken. Someone had betrayed her. Meanwhile, Adrien moved uneasily among the guards. He had not slept since reading Élise's letter. His comrades spoke of bread riots in Paris, of men carrying pitchforks and shouting for justice. But Adrien's thoughts were only of her, and of the Queen's piercing eyes, which seemed to look straight through walls. That night, Élise and Adrien met in the palace gardens, where fountains whispered louder than voices. Moonlight pooled across gravel paths. Roses perfumed the air, and yet both felt only dread. "She knows," Élise whispered. "I saw it in her face." Adrien gripped her hands. "Then we must be careful, more careful than ever. Promise me you'll burn the letter." Her eyes flickered. "I can't. It's all we have when we are apart." "You don't understand," Adrien urged. "If they find it, they'll use it against us. Love is not forgiven here, it's punished." But as he spoke, a shadow shifted beyond the hedges. Footsteps crunched faintly on gravel, halting, listening. Adrien froze. Someone was watching. He pulled Élise close, lowering his voice to a breath. "Go back now, don't look behind you." Her heart thundered as she slipped away toward the palace doors, every step aching with fear. Adrien turned, hand on the hilt of his sword, scanning the dark. And then, from the shadows, a voice slithered out. "Captain Lefebvre, such a dangerous secret you keep." Adrien's hand tightened on his sword. From the shadows emerged Comtesse Renard. Her lips curled into a smile sharper than any blade. She carried no weapon, yet her presence struck him like steel to the chest. "You should relax, Captain," she purred, her jeweled fan snapping open with a flick. "I am no assassin, but I know things. Dangerous things." Adrien kept his stance firm, though dread coiled through him. "You should forget whatever you think you know." The Comtesse laughed softly. "Forget? Oh, but gossip is the lifeblood of Versailles. And this," she leaned closer, lowering her voice to a whisper, "a forbidden affair between a guard and a lady-in-waiting. Why, that is no gossip. That is power." Adrien's jaw tightened. "What do you want?" Her eyes glittered. "You will be useful to me. When I ask for favors, you will obey. When I whisper commands, you will act. Refuse." She paused, fanning herself slowly, savoring the threat. "And tomorrow your lovely Élise will be cast from the Queen's court in disgrace, while you are dragged before the king for treason. Heads roll quickly these days, Captain." Rage burned in Adrien's chest, but he dared not strike her. One wrong move, and she would unleash the very poison she now dangled above their heads. The next day, Élise noticed the change in him. His gaze was heavier, his words clipped. When she pressed him, Adrien finally confessed. She knows. The Comtesse Renard saw us. She holds it over us like a blade. Élise's face drained of color. Then we are doomed. No, Adrien swore, grasping her hands. We will endure this somehow. Yet even as he spoke, the shadow of the Comtesse loomed between them, a constant reminder that their love was no longer their own. Days turned into weeks. Adrien carried out errands whispered by the Comtesse, delivering messages in secret, turning his watchful eyes away from suspicious meetings, even escorting certain carriages through palace gates without question. Each act bound him tighter to her web, until he felt less a soldier and more a puppet. Élise, meanwhile, lived beneath a mask. She smiled for the queen, laughed with the other ladies, but her every step was stalked by fear. At night she dreamt of Paris, the cries of the hungry, the roar of unrest. And in her dreams, she saw Adrien's blood staining the cobblestones. One evening, as rain hammered against the palace windows, Adrien burst into her chamber, soaked to the bone. His eyes blazed with desperation. "She has demanded something new," he whispered. "Something I cannot give." Élise clutched his arm. "What does she want?" Adrien's voice shook with fury. "She wants me to betray the crown." Adrien's words hung in the chamber like thunder. "She wants me to betray the crown." Élise staggered back, her hand gripping the bedpost as if to steady the world itself. The palace was dangerous enough with their secret, but treason? That was a noose waiting to tighten. "What does she mean?" Élise whispered. Adrien's jaw clenched. "The Comtesse ordered me to deliver sealed papers from her to men outside Versailles. Men she claims are sympathetic to reform, men plotting against the monarchy. If I obey, I am guilty of treason. If I refuse, she will expose us both." Élise's heart hammered. She had grown up among nobles, yet she had seen the hunger gnawing at peasants outside the gilded gates. Perhaps these men sought justice, or perhaps they sought blood. To choose meant stepping into a storm that could consume them. "You cannot do this," she pleaded. "If the king discovers—" Adrien cut her off, voice raw. "If the king discovers us, we are already dead." Silence pressed heavy between them. Rain lashed the windows. Somewhere down the corridors, laughter echoed from a feast, grotesque in its oblivion. Finally, Élise spoke, her voice trembling but fierce. "Then we must find another way. We cannot be her pawns forever." Adrien's eyes softened, but despair lingered. There is no escape from her grasp. But he was wrong, for beyond the palace walls the world was changing. In Paris, crowds gathered, shouting for liberty. Pamphlets spread like wildfire, denouncing tyranny. And within the palace itself, more than one noble toyed with betrayal, feeding whispers into the hands of conspirators. That very night, Adrien carried the Comtesse's packet beneath his uniform. He had no choice, yet every step toward the gates felt like walking deeper into damnation. The guard at the post nodded him through, never suspecting that hidden against his chest might lie the seeds of revolution. He delivered the packet into the hands of a hooded man. No words were exchanged, only a glance. Yet in that glance, Adrien saw the fever of rebellion. The man's eyes blazed with hunger, not for bread, but for change, for fire, for blood. Adrien's stomach turned as the man vanished into the night. When he returned to Élise, his voice was broken. "It is done. God forgive me." She clutched him tightly, though fear hollowed her chest. "We will survive this. Somehow we must." But even as she spoke, the Comtesse was already spreading her web further. She had tasted control, and she would not stop. The following morning, the palace bells tolled, summoning guards and nobles alike to the courtyard. A messenger had arrived from Paris, carrying news that would shatter everything. The bells of Versailles tolled like a dirge, echoing through gilded halls that suddenly felt like tombs. Courtiers rushed into the courtyard, silks rustling, wigs bobbing, their painted faces pale with unease. Soldiers gripped their muskets tighter, the air heavy with dread. The messenger knelt before the king, presenting a letter sealed with the wax of Paris. The king's hands shook as he broke it open. His lips pressed thin as he read, but it was Marie Antoinette who finally gave voice to the terror. "The people," she whispered, her voice cracking like porcelain. "They march. Thousands of them. They come for Versailles. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Panic flared. The palace, long untouchable, now trembled beneath the footsteps of an angry nation. Adrien stood among the guards, his heart pounding. He remembered the hooded man's burning eyes, the packet he had delivered. Was this the spark Renard had wanted? Was this uprising born of his own unwilling hand? That night torches flickered on the horizon. Shouts carried through the night air, carried on hunger, rage, and desperation. Élise pressed herself against her chamber window, watching the glow of Paris creep closer. "They are coming," she whispered. And when they arrive, nothing will remain the same. Adrien entered, armor-strapped, musket at his side. His face was stone, but his hands betrayed him, trembling as they reached for hers. "The king commands we stand ready to fight." Her eyes widened. Against the people? Against France itself? He could not answer. Duty demanded one thing, love another, conscience yet another. He was a man torn between three masters, and every choice promised ruin. Meanwhile, the Comtesse Renard moved like a serpent among the frightened nobles. She whispered poison into eager ears, that the monarchy was crumbling, that safety lay not in loyalty but in betrayal. Some listened. Some already plotted. Her web grew thicker, binding more victims in its silk. Élise knew they had little time. She grasped Adrien's hand, fierce desperation in her voice. "You must not let her control you. If she forces you again—" "She holds our lives," Adrien cut in. "If I disobey, she will destroy us both." Élise's eyes glistened, yet burned with resolve. "Then perhaps it is time she was destroyed first." Her words hung in the air like a blade unsheathed. Adrien stared at her, torn between fear and admiration. Élise, once a timid court lady, now spoke with the fire of revolution itself. Before he could respond, the alarm bells thundered again. Soldiers shouted across the courtyard, muskets clattering. The mob of Paris had reached the gates of Versailles, and with them came the end of everything. The morning air was thick with smoke and the raw stench of sweat, mud and hunger. Thousands pressed against the gilded gates of Versailles, women with empty baskets, men with makeshift pikes, children clinging to their mothers' skirts. Their cries thundered through the courtyard like cannon fire. "Bread! Bread! Bread!" Adrien stood shoulder to shoulder with fellow guards, musket in hand. His heart pounded as he looked upon the sea of faces, not soldiers, not an army, but the people of France. They carried no discipline, only desperation. And desperation, he knew, was the most dangerous weapon of all. Inside, Élise clutched the queen's arm as chaos unfolded. Marie Antoinette's painted face was pale as wax, her hands trembling against the lace of her gown. "They want me dead," she whispered, her voice barely more than a ghost. "They will tear us apart." The palace shook with pounding fists against its gates. Glass shattered as stones flew. Adrien shouted orders, but even as he raised his musket, he knew he could not fire upon them, not upon starving women, not upon children crying for bread. His oath to the crown warred with his oath to his conscience. Then, like a phantom, the Comtesse Renard appeared behind him, her voice smooth as poison. "Do it, Captain. One shot and the mob will scatter. Show them strength, and they will crawl back to their hovels." Adrien's grip faltered. He could not. Not when the people's cries echoed his own memories of hunger, of a childhood where his mother wept over empty pots. To obey her would damn his soul. To disobey might cost Élise her life. At that moment, the gates burst. The mob flooded inside like a river breaking its banks. Adrien dropped his musket, drawing his sword instead, using its flat to push back the tide, not to kill but to protect. Élise was swept in the chaos of the Queen's chambers, screams rising as the crowd surged closer. A woman in rags shouted curses at Marie Antoinette, calling her Madame Deficit. Others demanded blood. Guards fought desperately, but the palace was crumbling from within. In the swirl of chaos, Adrien found Élise clutching her hand, pulling her through smoke-filled corridors. "We must leave now. If we stay, we die with them." "But where?" she gasped. "Anywhere the Comtesse cannot follow." Yet even as they fled, a voice rang out from the grand staircase, silencing the mob for a heartbeat. It was the Comtesse Renard, arms raised like a queen of shadows, her voice cutting through the roar. "Behold the traitors!" she cried, pointing directly at Adrien and Élise. "They plot against you all. Every eye turned toward them. A hush rippled through the mob as Comtesse Renard's voice rang across the marble staircase. Her jeweled hand pointed with venomous certainty toward Adrien and Élise. "Seize them!" she cried. "They are no lovers, no innocents. They are spies of the crown, scheming against the people's revolution." The mob erupted. Fists shot into the air, curses spat like fire. Adrien's hand tightened on Élise's, dragging her back as the crowd surged forward. Muskets clattered, pitchforks gleamed, torches burned hotter. "They will tear us apart," Élise gasped, stumbling as Adrien pulled her into a side corridor. "Not if I can help it," Adrien growled, slamming a heavy door shut behind them. The sound of fists and boots thundered on the other side, the mob howling for blood. Through shadowed halls they fled, skirts torn, boots slipping on polished marble. Versailles, once a palace of splendor, had become a labyrinth of terror. Every hallway echoed with screams, every stairway a trap. "Why?" Élise cried. "Why would she do this? We have nothing to do with their revolution." Adrien's face was grim. "Because our love was never her interest. We were only pawns. Now she feeds us to the wolves to cover her own betrayal." They turned a corner, only to freeze. Ahead stood a knot of armed rebels, their faces smeared with ash and sweat, eyes wild with fury. "There!" one bellowed, pointing his pike. The Queen's lapdogs. Adrien shoved Élise behind him, drawing his sword. Steel clashed as the rebels surged. Adrien fought like a man possessed, not to kill but to protect. He parried blows, shoved attackers back, his blade sparking against iron. Élise screamed as one rebel lunged toward her, but Adrien's sword flashed, disarming him with brutal force. Still, they were outnumbered. Muskets were raised. Torches lifted. "Stop!" Élise cried, her voice cracking with desperation. "We are not your enemies!" "We love each other. That is our only crime." For a heartbeat, silence fell. Faces wavered. Some eyes softened, uncertain. But before doubt could root, the Comtesse's voice rose again, carried on the chaos. "Lies, she is the Queen's serpent, he the King's hound. Spill their blood before they betray you all." The hesitation shattered. Steel came forward once more. Adrien pulled Élise through another passage, slamming the door and barring it with his shoulder. His breath came ragged, sweat dripping from his brow. "They won't stop," he whispered. "Not now. We are hunted." Outside, the mob's roar swelled louder. The walls shook with the force of the revolution pressing in. And then, through the smoke-filled window, Adrien and Élise saw it. The royal flag of France, torn from the palace roof, burning as it fell into the hands of the people. The monarchy was collapsing, and with it, their last refuge. The palace of Versailles, once a temple of gold and music, had become a prison of screams. Smoke coiled through shattered windows, flames licked at silk curtains, and the thunder of the mob rattled the very stones. Adrien dragged Élise through a servant's passage, every step a battle against panic. His sword was streaked with ash and blood, his uniform torn, but his grip on her hand never faltered. "Where are we going?" she cried, stumbling over broken glass. "Anywhere but here," Adrien said, voice hoarse. "If they catch us, it's over." They burst into the stables. Horses screamed, panicked by the fire and noise. The acrid stench of hay and sweat filled the air. Adrien found a chestnut mare still tethered, trembling but alive. With frantic speed, he hoisted Élise into the saddle before swinging up behind her. The doors flew open with a crash, and they galloped into the chaos of the courtyard. Flames reflected in the mob's eyes as they surged like a tidal wave. Cries of "Liberté!" split the night, muskets flashing. Adrien spurred the horse forward, weaving through overturned carts and fallen bodies. "Traitors!" someone screamed. A shot rang out. Wood splintered inches from Élise's head. She ducked, clinging tighter to Adrien. The gates loomed ahead, half-broken, crawling with rioters. Adrien's jaw tightened. There was no path but through. He lowered his body against the horse's neck, whispering, "Faster, girl, for our lives." The mare leapt forward, hooves pounding against cobblestones. Torches swung, pikes jabbed, but momentum carried them. They burst through the gates like an arrow from a bow. The mob shrieked behind them, a chorus of rage echoing across the night. At last the roar of Versailles faded, swallowed by the dark countryside. Open fields stretched before them, lit only by moonlight and fire burning on the horizon. Élise turned, her face streaked with tears and ash. "We've escaped," she whispered. But Adrien's silence was heavy. He pressed a hand to his side. When it returned, it was wet with blood. "No," she gasped, clutching him. "A musket ball grazed me," he muttered, his voice strained. "It's nothing." But the pallor in his face told another story. Still, he forced a smile, leaning his forehead against hers. "As long as we are together, there is hope." Yet even as the words left his lips, thunder of hooves rose behind them. Shapes emerged on the road. Mounted riders, torches flaring, weapons gleaming. Not peasants, not rioters, soldiers. And at their head rode Comtesse Renaud, her face alight with triumph. "There is no escape," she called, her voice slicing the night. "Your love ends here." The night bled with firelight as hooves thundered across the countryside. Adrien's arms tightened around Élise as their mare raced through the fields, but the soldiers closed in swiftly, their torches glowing like a ring of hellfire. At their head, Comtesse Renaud rode tall, her silks snapping in the wind, her smile as cruel as steel. "There is no escape," she shouted, her voice cutting through the night. "Surrender, and perhaps the mob will grant you mercy." Adrien's grip on the reins faltered. Pain seared through his side, his blood soaking into Élise's gown. She clung to him, her heart breaking with every labored breath he drew. "Adrien, you cannot fight them all." His jaw clenched. "Then I will fight until I can no longer stand." They reached the edge of a ruined chapel, its stone walls half swallowed by weeds and moonlight. Adrien dismounted, nearly collapsing, but forced himself upright, sword drawn. Élise slipped down after him, steadying his wavering form. The soldiers fanned out, surrounding them. Muskets glimmered, blades caught the firelight. Renaud dismounted gracefully, her fan snapping open with mocking elegance. "Look at you," she sneered. "The noble captain, the little lady in waiting. Did you truly think love could conquer power?" Adrien lifted his sword, though his hand trembled. "Love is the only power worth dying for." The soldiers surged. Steel rang against steel as Adrien fought with the fury of a man who had nothing left to lose. He parried, struck, staggered, his blade flashing like lightning. Élise, unarmed, hurled stones, shoved torches, doing anything to shield him. Together, for one fleeting moment, they were unstoppable. But blood loss slowed him. His knees buckled. A soldier's musket cracked, smoke filling the air. Élise screamed, throwing herself before Adrien as the shot fired, yet fate twisted. The ball struck the crumbling chapel wall, stones cascading. Dust blinded the soldiers. In the chaos, Adrien dragged Élise into the ruins. They collapsed together beneath the shattered cross, the world trembling with the roar of revolution beyond. Renaud's voice pierced the smoke. "Find them. Bring me their heads." Adrien's breath rattled. He pressed a shaking hand to Élise's cheek, his eyes fading but fierce. "If I fall, promise me you'll live. Promise me you'll carry our love into whatever world rises from these ashes." Tears streamed down her face. "No, we live or we die together." He smiled faintly, his lips brushing hers. "Then let our love be our revolution." Outside, the mob's roar swelled, the monarchy crumbling into dust. The soldiers searched, but within the ruins silence fell. Only the broken chapel bore witness to their fate, whether death or escape. No one ever knew. But whispers spread, carried by rebels and peasants, alike of a guard and a lady, whose forbidden love defied both crown and tyrant. And some swore that it was not politics nor famine, but their love, reckless, burning, unbreakable, that truly sparked the fire of revolution. If you were captivated by the love, danger and betrayals inside Versailles, don't miss what comes next. Subscribe and ring the bell to witness more historical events, reimagined with cinematic drama, emotional intensity, and secrets that change the course of history forever.